Thank you so much, Miles, and it's great to hear what the city of Richmond Hill is doing. Seems like an exciting plans you have, and my talk should fit right in with all that. I'm gonna give you sort of half an hour, 40 minutes on the highlights of Eevee and what's happening here in Canada and around the world, and then hopefully spend 15 minutes answering your questions. I always like to start my presentations to talk about why are we even, talking about electric vehicles. The reason electric vehicles are getting so much attention, finally, actually, right about now, is because actually transportation is a very significant contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, here in Ontario, transportation is the largest emitting sector. And in most places around the world, it's number 1 or number 2. So most countries in the world, most cities cannot achieve their climate goals if they don't tackle transportation. And EVs just provide a very opportune way of addressing these emissions from transportation. Now, I do want to mention, I think that actually that hierarchy of needs it kind of reminds me of that Maslow's hierarchy of needs that that Miles put up at the beginning, is really important to remember. So when I talk about EVs, it's not to suggest that EVs are some silver bullet, some answer to all the world's problems. They're obviously not. If people are going to drive, we hope that they will, from our work and others, decide that the car that they drive is going to be an EV instead of a gas car. But we certainly don't want to suggest that this should replace all the other modes which do need to also be worked on, including walkable, bikeable cities and better transit and all these things. And when people say, well, what about transit? What about biking? I say, yes. This is not an either or proposition. This is we've got to do everything. And this is one of the things. And so just to put it in context, that it's no silver bullet. But it is a huge emitter. And so we have a big opportunity to take a bite out of those emissions. And the reason it's such a great emission reduction opportunity is because Ontario's electricity is already pretty clean. Our actually electricity grid, this is the makeup more or less on any given day, close to 60% nuclear, about 23 to 25% hydro, and then usually hovering between 8 and 10% renewable, which includes typically, wind, solar, a little bit of geothermal, a few miscellaneous other sources, and about 8 to 10% of natural gas. And the way our electricity grid works is our nuclear and hydro are what we call baseload electricity, which means they run 24/7. They run all the time. And so if you imagine your own personal use of electricity, you can imagine at night, you're not using very much because everything is turned off, you and everybody else. And then during the day, the demand goes up to the peak time, which is usually the middle of the day. And that's when we run natural gas. Natural gas is a peaking operation, which means we turn it on last and we turn it off first. And so we use that usually only in the daytime, except maybe on the coldest and hottest days of the year. And when are you going to plug in your car? Typically, you're going to plug it in at night when you're home and it's convenient. So it's such a good match with our electricity system because typically you're plugging in your car when the electricity grid is not only the cheapest because of time of use pricing, but it's also the best from an environmental point of view because it has the least emissions. Usually natural gas is not running at night. It does tend to run during the day for the peak. So that's just another reason why EVs make so much sense here in Ontario. And you might say, well, what about other provinces? Well, in many, many provinces of Canada, we're blessed with very clean electricity. And you can think of Manitoba, British Columbia, Quebec, which are all pretty much hydro provinces. And then people often ask me, well, what about Alberta and Saskatchewan, where they still run some coal and some natural gas on the grid? And that is true. The picture is not quite as rosy there when it comes to electric cars. But by the way, there's still a big environmental improvement with the switch. And that's because, of course, their whole grid isn't coal. They still have hydro and solar and wind and other things. And also, a large power plant, a large either natural gas or coal plant is more efficient than a very small internal combustion engine, so you still get the benefit. And so instead of what we get, which is almost like a 90+% emission reduction, in those provinces you get more like a 25% emission reduction. And lots of different scientists have done all the math on the emission reductions, and basically in almost every jurisdiction of the world, EVs provide a pretty good environmental benefit, really significant if your electricity is clean. So that's a long way of saying good for the environment. But a lot of people never understood why it was good for the environment. And when we talk about the economy, you have to remember that here in Ontario, a lot of these electricity assets are owned by you and me. These are all owned by provincially owned electricity companies for the most part. So for example, like OPG, the largest generator in the province, is owned by the province. And so we all have an ownership stake in this. And when people plug in, they're actually plugging into local infrastructure, local jobs. We generate our electricity right here. When you buy oil and gas, for the most part, that money leaves. That's not benefiting us very much. And so that's another reason that EVs make so much sense. And we think, why do governments give rebates to people to choose electric? Well, they do it for the environmental benefit, which is to get people to fuel switch and get those greenhouse gas emission reductions. But they also do it because they want people to use the local electricity resource rather than oil and gas, which is better for the local economy. And so for all those reasons, EVs makes very much sense in most places in the world. Okay, so just 2 minutes on who's Plug and Drive. So as Miles said, we're a nonprofit. We're all about educating consumers. Of course, during COVID, we've done tons of webinars like this. Previous to that, we did most of our events in person. And I like to say, just trying to get the butts in seats, trying to get people to try the cars, get in the seat of the car and sort of have that experience, a little bit of an aha experience that's like, wow, this is a really good car. I could totally drive this car. And we need people to have that moment because they have sometimes a lot of preconceived ideas that somehow it's not going to suit their life. And so we do find that the test drive experience really, really important. In 2017, we opened the world's first EV Discovery Center, which is sort of like a one-stop shop where you can come and try all different types of EVs, no pressure to buy anything. This is us at the ribbon cutting of that center. It's not very far from Richmond Hill. It's at Finch and Dufferin. Just buzz right down. So if you haven't visited us, you gotta come. We are open. We actually have been open all through COVID, but we moved to an appointment-only system. We used to be a drop-in where as many people could come as wanted. We've gone to an appointment booking system online where then you basically get the place to yourself, you and your spouse, or you and your family. We've kept it that way still, just to keep people safe and make people comfortable. And also now we know how many people are coming. So actually we found one of the small perks of COVID that sometimes you find a system that works even better than what you did before. But so you can go online to our website and book an appointment. It's a really fun place to come. Like any given time, we have 10 to 15 different makes and models of EV available to drive. Lots of fun, no pressure to buy anything. And of course, we do have an event venue there. Pre-COVID, we hosted tons of school groups, community groups, board meetings, any kind of meeting. We had all kinds. We're just creeping back. We've had a couple of school field trips. We've got a few companies coming in. So if you happen to work somewhere that you think it would be a fun venue, much nicer than going to an airport hotel, I can tell you that. Take test drives on the breaks and fun environments. So if you're interested, just give us a call. during COVID, we came up with an idea that was actually just coincidental because it was in the planning pre-COVID to build something that we call the MEET, the Mobile Eevee Education Trailer. So somewhere in between showing up with some flags and tents for an event on a one-day event, which we've done some of those in Richmond Hill, and our center, which is full on, you know, with all kinds of interactive tools and a bricks and mortar. This is like a trailer that opens up. The trailer doesn't really do it justice. As you can see, it's very beautiful. And it pops open to sort of a 6 parking spot facility that allows people to get that Eevee Discovery Center right in their own community. So we've started with Ottawa. We brought it to Ottawa for 2 months and it was a big hit. Now we're traveling all over. We just spent a month in Burlington. It's going out to New Brunswick for the next month, and then it's back in Ontario again. It'll be in Wellington County for a while. It's going to be in Durham Region for a while, up to the Bruce Peninsula. Just check our events page if that might be more convenient for you to visit the meet instead of the center. Please do. And we're also doing that by appointment, so please do book with us. And of course, we always do the one-day shows in different towns and cities all across Canada. This is just bringing a couple of cars and chargers to you in your town so that, you know, people who are too far away from the center can still get a chance to try the cars. And we take this typically any place that's too far for people to come to our center. Super fun. So if you know of a community that would really love it, let me know. And of course, we are a nonprofit, and I would be remiss if I did not thank the sponsors. We couldn't do any of what we do if we didn't have supportive sponsors. As you can see, a lot of our sponsors are electricity companies, people who make cars, people who make chargers. Of course, they're all in the biz, the Eevee biz, you know, for the most part. Anyway, we really appreciate their support, especially during COVID when we were not able to do nearly as many events as we would normally do. And so we thank them for sticking with us through all this craziness. And yeah, they make our work possible. All right, so I already told you why we get the big emission reduction. It's our clean electricity grid, at least 90%. And if you plug in the middle of the night, it can sometimes be as much as 98% emission reduction. So when people say, like, is it really better for the environment? Yes, it really, really is. Even taking into account the making of the batteries, the disposal of the batteries, all those things, most emissions come from the driving, not from the making. So even though EVs do create a little bit more emissions than a gas car in the manufacturing process, they are so much less in the driving that it's minuscule in comparison. It's really a huge reduction. In fact, there's probably nothing else you could do in your personal life that would be as big other than giving up a car altogether, or maybe never going on a plane. Those would be the only two things I can think of that would actually cause a bigger emission reduction. What we used to hear from a lot of people was, well, I'm interested, but there isn't a car that I like, or I'm waiting for the SUV, or I'm waiting for Toyota because I only buy Toyota and Toyota doesn't have one yet, or whatever the reason. This kind of stuff is going away as a problem. You know, sure, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, there were only a couple of makes and models. Now we're over 50 makes and models in Canada. This time next year will be over 100. And so there really will no longer be the sort of, I'm waiting for the SUV or truck, I'm waiting for this or that. Every brand has something to offer. All the sizes and shapes are available pretty much. The pickup trucks are coming this year, and then really there's nothing that's not available. So I do find we're hearing about this less and less as a concern. The other concern, of course, we would hear a lot about was the range. You know, it doesn't, I drive too far, it doesn't have enough range for me. Now, that was, I think, a valid concern. The early cars only had 100, 120 kilometers of range. My first EV was a Nissan Leaf in 2011, and that one got 130 kilometers of range on the best possible day. In the depth of winter, minus 30 day, it probably only got 75. So it was short range. So perfect for a city driver. It's fine. If you're somebody who's doing a short commute every day, no problem. But if you were somebody who did longer drives, then it wouldn't work. So this issue also, I think 3 to 5 years from now, we won't even hear about this anymore. Most of the vehicles that are coming out now have at least 400 kilometers of range or more. It's getting better and better. There's many vehicles out there now with 500 plus, and that just rivals any gas car, stops being an issue. Also, better charging infrastructure helps, and we're seeing more and more out there, so that makes it easier as well. And the final thing I like to say about range is I think people sometimes overstate how much range they need because they're used to that. They're used to a gas tank that holds the equivalent of 600 kilometers, so that's what they want. But if you really look at what you do on a given day, the stats tell us that 80% of Canadians only drive 50 kilometers or less every day. And so for most of us, this range isn't even an issue most days of the year. Where it is an issue is the once or twice a year when you take a road trip. And so many people are fixated on the road trip. They're saying, well, what if I want to drive to Montreal? And then I say, well, do you? They said, well, yeah, once a year. So look, think about your car for the 98% of your trips, not for the one trip a year that you happen to go far. Of course, now the cars can do it, but I would even say to you, if you do some really crazy long road trip once a year, take a different car, take the train, rent a car, do something else, and buy the Eevee for your 98, 99% of your trips, which are probably 50 kilometers or less. Now, I know there'll be some people out there who drive 200, 300 kilometers every day. It's rare, but there are people like that. And then you got to be more careful about the range of which vehicle you choose. But for most of us, even a moderate range Eevee can do the job, especially in the case where most Canadian families have 2 cars. And so this isn't even the only car. If this is your commuter car and the other car you can use for a road trip or whatever. So then it's really a no-brainer for the second car to be an Eevee. And finally, the thing I think a lot of people forget is the money savings. We talk a lot about environment, but you save a lot of money. Now, we did this math of save about $2,000 a year on $1.30 gas. I mean, that's on an average Canadian driver, 20,000 clicks a year. Now, and I'm bang on the Canadian average. I pretty much drive 20,000 kilometers a year. Right now, I'm saving about $4,000 a year on fuel alone, because electricity is right now running about 1/6 the price of gas. So when you're paying, I don't know, is it over $2 now? It's crazy. I'm paying the equivalent of less than 30 cents a liter equivalent. 30 cents. And so when people say, oh, EVs, they're so expensive. It's like, well, not really. You have to think about the total cost of ownership, not just the cost of the car up front, but what it's going to cost you in the long run. And this is the challenge for EV, is to say to people, pay now to save later. And you will save. And even like a Toyota Corolla or a Honda Civic is more expensive than a Tesla when you do the math over 7 years. So when people say, but these cars are so expensive, I think you have to think more about where the cost is. And if you don't believe me on this, I know it's hard to get your mind around, because in the past, all the cars had the gas price. And so you didn't really have to compare them on this basis, but this is different. We have a tool on our website that's really handy for calculating your total cost of ownership. It's a microsite. So like our website is pluganddrive.ca, and this microsite is ev.pluganddrive.ca, or you can just get there through our website. Basically, you can enter in your current vehicle that you own, gas car. We have all the makes and models are in there. And then you can compare it to any EV on the market, and you can enter in how much you drive, your local price of gas. You can toggle the price of electricity. You can make all kinds of changes if you want. And then it'll give you a graph with a monthly saving, how much you're going to save every month. And so how long will it take you until you've paid off that upfront difference that you paid. Most people in Canada, they will have that paid off in about 3 to 4, maybe 5 years at the most, if you don't drive very much. If you drive a lot, you'll make the payback sooner. So really handy to sort of help with that understanding of that total cost of ownership. Okay, just going to go over some, you know, we've given a lot of talks, we've talked to a lot of people, and so we kind of know what type of people buy what type of vehicle. Now, these are generalizations, but just to help you, what we find is the kind of people who tend to be willing to take buy a fully electric car, and when I say that, I mean battery only, no gas at all. They tend to be people who drive, you know, less than 100 kilometers a day in terms of their daily commute. They tend to be two-car families because they have the other car if they want to take a long trip. And they tend to have access to a plug. So single family home, maybe townhouse, or condo that has a plug at the spot. So those tend to be the factors that push people to the fully electric. Of course, you save more money if you go fully electric rather than a plug-in hybrid, where you save something, but you still have gas running and you've got more maintenance because you're running 2 systems. You won't save as much, you'll still save something. So that tends to be the fully electric profile. On the other hand, plug-in hybrid, when I say plug-in hybrid, I mean it has a battery and it runs on electricity for a period. Usually it's 40 to 80 kilometers in battery length for driving. Then it switches to gas. So it has both systems on it. So that's things like you've heard of the Chevy Volt with a V, the Ford C-Max, the previous Ioniq was a plug-in hybrid. There's a bunch of them. And people who tend to choose a plug-in hybrid, often they are one-car families and they make a lot of road trips, or for example, their kids in competitive something. So competitive hockey, competitive soccer, whatever it is. So they're driving all over for tournaments and things, and they don't know exactly where they're going to have to go. People in sales who have very erratic commutes and are going to all different work sites, etc. People like that tend to choose a plug-in hybrid, or they just have an extremely long commute, even if it's always the same. And then the other folks we find that tend to choose this type of car are the people who don't have an easy way to get a plug. They're either garage orphans, they live in a part of town that doesn't have garages, you know, like in the city of Toronto or in Ottawa, there's a lot of neighborhoods where there's no garages, or they live in an apartment or a condo and it's challenging to get a plug. So those are kind of the 2 general types of people. Lots of exceptions to these rules, by the way. I know lots of people who live in condos who got a fully electric car and they charge in public places, or they charge at work, or they do other things. But for the most part, this is what we have found. And when I talk about charging, I always like to kind of explain it, because I know for newbies, that's a big confusion point. People imagine this being very tricky. Now, what I try to tell people is I get home and it's just like my phone. I just plug it in and I forget about it. So when people say, like, how long does it take? The truthful answer is, I don't know. I don't care, because I'm at my house. I'm not going anywhere. So it doesn't matter for me. It's going to charge overnight. And by the time I go in the morning, it's going to be fully charged. So the time just isn't really important. The only time that it is important is when you're on a road trip and you're using public charging. That's different. Then you're waiting. But at home, you're never waiting. You're just home overnight. So it's not relevant. If you have an outlet at home, just a regular 110 outlet, just like you would plug in your phone, or outside, you know, your weed whacker or whatever, your Christmas lights, you're ready. That kind of plug can charge any car. They all come with a cord set in the trunk that can plug into this kind of outlet. Now, the only downside of using this kind of outlet, you don't actually need a charger, is it's very slow. So you're going to pick up about 8 kilometers every hour you charge. Now, that doesn't sound like very much. If you're driving a plug-in hybrid and the battery only has 50 kilometers of range, This is all you need. You're never going to need more than this. You just plug in, you know, this is going to fully charge your car in a couple hours. Whereas if you're driving one of the newer EVs that's got a big battery, that's got 400, 500 kilometers range, that level 1 charger, if you drive a lot, is going to be too slow. Because to go from dead empty to 400 kilometers, that's going to take all weekend on a 110 plug. So that's when people go up to this, what I call level 2. Now, level 2 is when you see someone with a home charger. Just think dryer plug. It's basically the same as a dryer plug or a stove plug. It's a 220, 240 plug, and that speeds up your charging a lot. Then you get about 30 kilometers an hour. All the EVs on the market right now will charge overnight on a level 2 charger. This is what I have at home. Mine actually is similar to this photo. You see the photo on the right. It's outside. I don't have a garage. Mine just is attached to my house, but I do have a driveway attached to my house outside. I live in Toronto. And it just sits outside in the rain and the snow and everything. I've had it there for 12 years. I've never had a problem with it. The picture on the left is more what you would see at a commercial, like at the mall or maybe at a restaurant or, you know, a big box store or something like that. That one, it's still just a level 2. It's the same thing. It's a dryer plug, but it's just more sturdy. It might have a payment system on it, but it's the same thing. When you hear people say level 3, what they mean is something that you would only use on the road. That's a road trip kind of charger. You hear people say DC fast charger, quick charger. Tesla calls them superchargers. This just means fast. And these will charge your car, let's say 250, 300 kilometers in less than an hour. So this is the kind of thing you're going to do on a road trip. You could never have this at home. It's too high powered. You don't have capacity for it at home. You're going to stop. You're going to plug in your car. You're going to go get lunch. You're going to go to the bathroom or whatever, and you're going to come back and you're going to carry on your way. That's what these are. And more, you're seeing them more and more everywhere. And so it makes all that sort of road trip possible. If you are somebody who decides you're interested in a home charger, we do have an online store on the website. It's called chargemycar.ca, or you can also just get there through Plug and Drive. We did this because we found it was hard for people to figure out where to get chargers. There's like so many different companies selling chargers and they couldn't compare them. So we just put them all together on a website, and you can buy them right off our site. It'll get delivered to your house. This is really, we don't make money at this. We just do it more as a way to, you know, encourage people and to show them it's not hard. It's not hard to do. There's lots of different makes and models, from many bells and whistles to no bells and whistles, and that just affects the price. And just to give you some confidence about, you know, ability to travel around, people say, well, I'm interested in an electric car, but I'm afraid there's not enough charging stations out there. I think that's a little bit of a misleading thing that you hear in the media a lot. There's actually a lot of chargers out there. For the kind of driving that most people do, it's totally good. Now, where it does get challenging is if you travel very remote. If you go to very remote parts of the province, yes, it's definitely challenging. There aren't too many chargers. And you can even see in this picture, as you get further north, you know, there's fewer and fewer. But if you live in the urban, suburban, you know, southwestern Ontario, there's tons. The green ones are level 2, and those orange ones are the level 3 for the quick charge. So, you know, they're actually everywhere. And so you'll be surprised that maybe they were there and you just weren't looking for them, because they're small. It's like a small box that's either under a parkade or maybe behind a building, and you just didn't see it. There's probably some in places you visit quite often. And by the way, more and more workplaces are getting level 2s as well. So it's getting easier all the time. When I first started driving my first EV in 2011, there really were none. And even then it was okay, because I was charging most of the time at home. So what you'll find is mostly you'll charge at home and you're not going to be using public charging all that much anyway. So it's not as big of a deal as you might think. There's a lot of different networks popping up of public charging. which is great. More and more out there all the time. At the bottom here, that's Eevee. That's the new network that's just been put in at the en route stations. That's a partnership between OPG and Hydro One. So that's really important location. And they're putting them in at Petrocan, so you can drive across Canada. They're at Shell. They're all over the place now. And so it's really getting easier. I would say the one downside of all this is all the machines are just a little bit different. And so the first time you go to any one, it's like, okay, I've got to figure out how this one works. More or less, they work similarly, but they don't all take a credit card. Just so you know, most of them do, but not all of them. So that's why you want to go on that public charging map before you take your trip and click on the dot and get this drop down, and it'll tell you how to pay, where it is, and all that information, how much it costs, so that you're not standing there trying to figure it out. But I do think there'll be some consolidations among these different companies, and it's sort of like our, cell service, or before there was Interac at banking, all these things took time to kind of come together, and we're sort of in that time right now, but it's getting easier all the time. I didn't want to end without letting you know that we do still have a rebate available, not through the government. Unfortunately, our provincial government does not provide any Eevee incentives. It used to. Before the Ford government came in, the previous Liberals did have an incentive on any new Eevee purchase below a certain price cap. That went away when Ford got elected, and unfortunately, that's right when a lot of other provinces put one in. So we're actually the outlier now. Most provinces of Canada do have an incentive now, just not Ontario. But one thing we do have is a used Eevee incentive that's offered by Plug and Drive. We partnered with the Clean Air Partnership and the Brigham Foundation, which is a family foundation, to support a used Eevee incentive. And there's a couple of rules, and you can learn all about it on our website, but you can get $1,000 back on a used Eevee, and you can get a second $1,000 if you buy the used Eevee and you scrap an old gas car. This program has a limited amount of money in it left. We've been running it for about 2.5 years. It will run out at some point relatively soon. So if you are keen to do it, you got to act now. It's a first come, first serve program. Okay, just a few minutes on Canada and how we're doing compared to the rest of the world and what we could do to do better. And then we'll open it up to questions. So Canada's doing okay. Nah, I would say we're doing average, which, I wish I could say we were doing much better, but we're not. It's improving. Now we're at about 8% of new car sales in 2022. That's just new cars, not all the cars. And that varies a lot across the country. So in British Columbia, we're up over 12-13%. In Quebec, it's at about 10%. Ontario, we're down around 3%. And other provinces are mixed, so it averages out. Unfortunately, Ontario is low because we don't have the incentive. In BC, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, the Yukon, PEI, they all have an incentive that gets added to the federal incentive. So the one incentive that we still get for new vehicles is the federal incentive, which is $5,000, and only applies if the car is below a certain price. All this to say, though, you can see that our sale of EVs, BEV, that's a fully electric vehicle in the graph on the left, doubling every year, which is great. That's good. I mean, when you compare Q1 of 2021 to Q1 of 2022, 50% more. So that's good. But we need to do more. Here's what's happening in the rest of the world. China is selling, almost 50%. New car sales are EVs. In Europe, it's about almost 25%. The US is even at 20% averaged out. I mean, some states better than others, but really good. We're about 10th in this. So like I said, just okay. And so what could we do better? Well, we know what some of the others have been doing. As I said, now, you know, we can see what the Europeans are doing. We can see what China's doing. And we know, so it's not a mystery what to do to improve adoption if that's what we want. If we want to reduce emissions from transportation, if we're serious about this net zero target, you know, this is one of the easier things to get people to do, but you have to help them do it. There is that upfront sticker shock, and we do have to help people get over that. So the feds are giving that $5,000. It helps. It's not quite enough. Norway is just killing it. They're doing about, in the first quarter of 2022, 97% of new car sales were electric. Norway's cold. Norway's got a lot of remote parts. Now, it's not as big as Canada, but most of us aren't driving across Canada. You know, so the fact that we live in a big country, isn't that relevant to most drivers? So why is Norway doing so well and we're not? Well, Norway put a massive tax on gas cars and then put a whole bunch of incentives on EVs. So actually EVs are cheaper. And they also incentivize parking in cities and free HOV lanes and all sorts of other sort of incentives to encourage people. And it worked. So like I said, it's no mystery. Lots of countries are doing much better than us. If you look at what could be done, we have, you know, infrastructure. We've done okay. We could do better. Like I said, the charging infrastructure out there is good, but it's not good enough. We got to do more for condos and apartments so that people can plug in at home, and we got to do more for workplaces. And then, you know, be strategic about our public charging for people who want to take trips. One area we are doing really well on is manufacturing, and I'm just going to spend 1 minute on that. Education, like what I'm trying to do, we could do a lot better. There's a few groups like mine and a few others that are trying to do it, but let's face it, we can't afford television commercials or big budget advertising to help people. We need help with all that. We need more, you know, better incentive structure. We need to incentivize used better. We have to change our building codes. Why should it be in 2022 that you can build a new apartment building or condo and not put any plugs in the garage? How can that be? That does not make any sense. If you think your building should be still useful in 50 years, we all know where this is going. It should be done. It's the cheapest to do it when you're building the building. It's expensive to retrofit a building. So this is just smart planning. So that's not required here in Ontario yet. In a lot of other places it is. We need better financing for EVs. Right now, financing an EV is more expensive than a gas car. Why is that? It's because, you know, there's less supply, so people will pay it, but it's not right. And finally, Zev Standard. You might have heard this in the news. The feds announced that they are going to put in what they call a Zev Standard, and what that means is it's a requirement. So, hey, automaker, you want to sell your gas cars in this country, you have to sell a certain percentage of EVs, and that percentage is going to keep going up. And that's a way to actually, at no cost to the government or to us, to make sure the automakers send us EVs. Because right now, if you went to a bunch of car lots in Richmond Hill, I bet you'd be hard pressed to find one EV, let alone, you know, the kind of volume that we need. They're just not available. And so if people say, why aren't more people buying them? It's like, well, they're not available. They're not on the lots. We don't have enough. And if you have a Zev Standard, they send the cars. So yes, of course, there are these issues of chip shortage and all this stuff. That's affecting gas cars as well in terms of supply, but actually the EV shortage even happened before that. So it's not just that. It's also because they send the cars where the policies are more friendly to EVs and they know they're going to sell them, and we don't have them. So this is something that can be done, and the feds say they're going to do it. So if you care about it, you should be talking to your MP and saying, please, we do want you to do it. Please don't renege on this commitment. One thing I said we're doing well here in Ontario, it's pretty good, is manufacturing. In the last year and a half, we've had a lot of big announcements around big, huge investments in retrofitting automaking facilities for electrics. We heard that from Stellantis. Stellantis is the latest one. And by the way, Stellantis is Chrysler, if you're wondering who that is. It's a new name. It always throws people off. Who the heck is Stellantis? It's Chrysler. General Motors has made a huge investment in Ingersoll. That's to make delivery trucks called Break Drop. Ford is investing in the Oakville plant to make EVs there. And Honda just made an announcement. I think it's in Cambridge area to also make, probably it'll be plug-in hybrids, but we don't know exactly what it's going to be, but it's going to be electrified. So huge, in the billions of dollars. So that's good. That's good for Canadian jobs, but it doesn't mean that Ontarians are going to buy these cars. We still have to do more to incentivize people to buy them, because all these cars could end up in the US. We need to have the policies for people to buy them. It just the fact that we're making them doesn't do it. So I'm all for this. It's good, but it's not enough. So as I said, you know, the feds are making commitments. They're committing to more incentive money. They're committing to the Zev mandate. They've committed a lot of money to charging infrastructure. So it's all good. And they added to that. They added some stuff for heavy duty, some stuff for buses, which is great. Electrified bus and school bus, really good. And a bunch of clean electricity initiatives to make sure when we're plugging in our cars, they're plugging into clean electricity. So, I mean, if all these things actually happen, these are just announcements at this point. So we don't know for sure these things are all going to happen. So we all need to keep the pressure on so that they do happen. And this is my final slide before I just let you ask me your questions. We talk always about the environment and about the cost savings and good for the economy and all that. Sometimes we forget to talk about the health benefit, and we forget that actually air emissions are a big problem when it comes to human health. And there was a study just done recently in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area, and basically they did a model, and it was done by a bunch of U of T professors. They did a model to say what happened if we would switch all the vehicles in the GTA to electric. What would happen to the air quality? And the benefits are massive. The benefits to reduce hospital visits, reduce deaths, reduce asthma, reduce all sorts of ailments that we suffer from. And we forget that this pollution actually causes health consequences. And so each car on the road today, each EV is actually worth about almost $10,000 in other social benefits to everyone. And so when you think about giving incentive to one person, don't think about it like, oh, why are they handing money to this one person to buy a car? This switching over to electrified transportation benefits all of us. And so with that, this is my contact information. You can reach out to me if you want, if you have questions that you don't think of today or you don't want to ask today. And I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Well, thanks so much, Cara. That was so interesting for me in several respects, as a municipal employee in the sustainability area, but also as a driver and someone who's had an EV myself for a little while. Really interesting to hear some of those kind of finer points and some of the updates on where this is going. So I would certainly encourage anyone who does have a question, if you'd like to unmute, please feel free to do so, as it's an intimate group. If you would prefer to type it into the chat, please go ahead. I think Doreen may have a question, so go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm quite keen but leery financially to get one of these, although my car is 17 years old, so it's still going strong. But is there a list someplace perhaps on your site that would be like all the total costs? It's like, from what you've said, it sounds like the car could be 45,000 or so. The electrical charging station, because I'm not going to go out in the middle of the night to go charge someplace else. I'm not doing that. So I probably need one in the garage, and therefore I have to pay for the charger. Probably hire someone to tear through my walls to connect it to the panel in the basement. That's not cheap. Just I can just see like this whole laundry list, and I don't know all the rest of the laundry list. Do you have
Okay, that's
a list
the
like
list.
that?
The list you
Good.
gave, that's it.
That's it. All
Now,
right.
as I said, if you have a 110 outlet in your garage already, like a regular plug, you actually don't need anything else. You're ready.
Yeah, but that's still an hour electricity, and electricity has a cost as well.
Sure.
So I mean, if I can only
tell
get,
you, as I mentioned at the beginning, you got to compare that to what you're going to pay for gas. So your electricity will cost you on average, depends how much you drive, right? The more you drive, it's like same with gas, the more you drive, the more it costs. On average, it's cost between, I would say, $2 and $4 to fill up your car overnight. And you're probably going to do that once or twice a week.
with level 1?
It doesn't matter, whichever one. It doesn't matter. Level 1 or level 2 just affects the speed. It doesn't affect the total amount that you're going to use.
Well, if I'm using more, I'm going to have to do it 5 hours, not 2.
Doesn't make a difference though. It's about how much electricity you use.
Exactly. That's my point. Yeah, that's my point.
Right. So you're going to fill up your battery slowly or quickly. So it's going to be the same total amount of electricity, whether you plug it in on level 1 or level 2.
It's not. It's because you said a level 2 could charge 30 kilometers in 1 hour, but a level 1 only 8. So no, it's not the same. A level 1 would take me.
I'll try again.
It would take me 4 hours to do that same amount.
Okay. Try to think about it like this. You can plug your car in on a level 2. You're going to fill it, let's say, in 3 hours. If you plug it in on level 1, it's going to take 10 hours. But you're still going to use the same amount of electricity, whichever way you do it. It just affects the speed.
It's kind of, maybe an analogy too would be turning on your tap. It would almost be like filling up a glass of water and turning on your tap, just a little bit, so it's dripping in, or turning it fuller. So you're filling up the cup either way.
All right, I see what you're saying, but to be really blunt, I hate to say this in a negative way, but that's not how Electra tends to charge. They charge per kilowatt, right?
You're using the same number of kilowatts.
So you're thinking that a level 1 uses less kilowatts per hour than
a level 2? It's the same. It's just slower. How many kilowatts you use is not affected, whether you use level 1 or level 2. Just think it's only a matter of how fast you get it. You're still going to get the same amount. Let's say your battery holds 100, try to just picture kilowatts. You're going to get a total of 100. Okay. And you could do it slowly or you could do it quickly, but you're still just going to get 100.
All right. That's what you pay for.
So that's what you pay for.
All right.
So the cost to you, whatever way you get it, is going to be between $2 and $4, probably twice a week. It costs me about $30 extra a month on my electricity bill, and I have 2 EVs.
All right. So
I think
that
on
helps.
average, people spend like $20 a month ish. Miles, you drive an EV. What does it cost you a month?
Yeah, it's right in that
$20.
Yeah. So it's
so it's not a lot, but I mean, compared to gas, which right now is, I know, like $150 to fill up a tank. So yes, but going back to your original question, so there's the cost of the electricity, which is low, but there is the cost to put in the charger, which is a valid concern. On average, the chargers are anywhere from $500 to $1,000 ish. On average, I'd say $700-800 for the charger, and then to put the charger in, maybe another $500. On average, it costs people somewhere from $1,200 to $2,000 all in to put in the level 2 charger if they do want it.
Okay.
So I would say you got to count on, let's say, $2,000 on top of the price of your car.
All right. That sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Doreen. I'm going to just turn to another question related to batteries. So how long, this is from, oh, I can't see the full name, but how long does a battery last before it either doesn't fully charge, so you can't get it up to its full capacity, or just stops charging altogether?
Right. So the batteries so far, like the oldest EV on the road right now is a 2011. So we only have 10, 11 years of experience right now. So the truthful answer is we don't know, beyond that. But what we do know so far is that the batteries are lasting really, really well. And on average, they're only degrading like 1 to 1.5% a year. So, if your car's 5 years old, you might see like a 7, 8% degradation of your battery life. So you will notice a slight reduction in range maybe after about 5 years. Like I have a 5-year-old Chevy Bolt, and I did notice a little bit of a reduction. I just got this battery fix because they gave us all, they had a recall and they gave us all a battery fix, and actually my range is better than it was in year 1 right now. So I'm not experiencing that, but for the most part, the batteries are lasting really, really well, and all the manufacturers put an 8 to 10 year warranty on the battery, expecting them to last probably longer than you'll keep the car. So for the most part, battery life doesn't look like it's going to be an issue.
Okay, thanks, Cara. And just actually back to the charger question or charger issue, can the charger, if you install one in your home, can it be easily moved to another house if you move?
Yeah, so there's a few different types of charger, and if you go on our website, it'll probably become apparent, but there's something that basically looks like a plug, and it plugs into a dryer plug. And so that one's totally portable. You can just unplug it so you just get the dryer plug installed in your garage, and then you just plug the charger right into that, and then you can just take it with you. If you get it hardwired into the wall, then of course it's harder to move. I hardwired mine in because mine's outside my house, and I didn't want someone to just take it. But if I had it inside a garage, I would probably have gotten that plug-in type, because actually some people take it on camping trips and just use it as a portable thing that they use. So that is an option.
Okay, great, thank you. And I see Iris has raised her hand. Go ahead, Iris.
Thank you. So hello, a bit of a long question, but how effective do you think the EV incentives that you mentioned earlier were in encouraging people to purchase EVs, since like some of the increase in EV purchases could be accredited to change the changing social incentive to be more eco-friendly? And also I was wondering if you know of any other specific local, provincial, or even federal policies that exist to incentivize consumers to purchase electric vehicles or like use greener forms of transportation, and how effective do you find those?
Sure. So I do, I won't get into what's going on in every province, but on our website, we do have an incentives page that shows all the different incentives in the different provinces. Well, we know they're effective because actually we saw what happened when Ontario cut the incentive. That's probably the best evidence. So Ontario had an incentive and then we lost it. And we went from selling about 10% of new car sales EV down to like 2%, like literally overnight. So it did make a big difference. Now, in BC and Quebec, they have incentives that stack on top of the federal incentive, and they sell a lot more EVs than we do here in Ontario. So that is additional incentive. You could say, though, those people might be more concerned about the environment, or they might, which is actually the case in BC, for example. But what we do find is that even with environmental concerns, people are more motivated by the savings. I would like to say that environmental concerns motivate people to buy things, but it actually usually doesn't.
And if I can just throw in quickly, Karen and Iris, thanks for the question. I know in my case, we bought our electric vehicle during the time of the provincial incentive. And I think what we found was with the incentive, it basically and I know, Cara, what you said about the future savings, but as a car buyer, you're not always thinking that way. And what happened with the
Right.
incentive is it brought the cost basically down to the same, more or less the
Exactly.
same as what a gas, like the equivalent gas car would have
The
been.
upfront price, yeah.
So that made it very easy, I know, for us,
Yeah, me
you know,
too.
to go
Yeah.
that route.
Me
And then
too.
the savings then
And this
come
is why
after.
we think that we need the incentives, and the incentives won't be needed forever. Like battery prices keep dropping as EVs kind of get more economies of scale. They're made like in bigger numbers. They're not, which isn't really happening right now. The price will become even with gas cars. But until that happens, exactly what you're describing, you need to help with that differential so people don't go, wow, it's like $8,000 more. That's too much more for me to justify, even though they will save it over time. It's really hard for people to see that upfront difference and be willing to do it. And I understand a lot of people don't have the upfront money to do it. So so we do have to help them with that differential, and that's where incentives really help.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I see we're about 8:07. If there's no other questions right now, I'm going to throw in a quick one of my own. Because I'm curious what you have to say on this, Cara, and it relates back to Richmond Hill, the city of Richmond Hill, and maybe the scenario we find ourselves in. I'm just curious, kind of like what Iris was saying with incentives, but I'm wondering more with infrastructure. So in terms of public charging stations, you know, I'm thinking about, you know, a place like Richmond Hill, maybe even more so where I live in Stouffville, where there aren't very many at all. And I'm wondering, you know, in that sort of chicken and egg scenario, do people typically start buying more in an area where there are more chargers available? Or do, you know, do the chargers come once you see, oh, there's a demand because people have bought the vehicles?
It's really hard to assess that. We've tried, and some people have done studies. One thing studies do show is that chargers at work really help. Because when people, now, of course, a lot of us haven't been going to work, but if we were going back to work, and I think a lot of us are starting to go back, you know, seeing chargers at work and seeing colleagues plugging in their cars at work, that actually motivates people, and they talk to their colleagues and then they think, oh, I could do that. That tends to work. Having them in public places, it seems to have less influence. Now, when you mention something like, okay, there aren't too many in Stouffville or whatever, but most people who live in Stouffville are going to live in single family homes with a garage or with a place to park at their house. And so they actually aren't going to charge their car in their own town. They're going to charge at home. Where they need the charger is somewhere else they're going, you know, like someplace far. And so that's sort of the misunderstanding with the charging. It's like, you don't actually need them where you are, you need them where you might go. And so you need them in tourist locations, you need them at highway rest stops, but you don't need them everywhere. But I do think workplace, like if the government was going to invest money, or the city of Richmond Hill was going to invest money, I would say workplace is hugely important to people, especially for those people who can't get a plug at home. And then to help people in apartments and condos, because they have a hard time getting a plug at home. So to me, those would be the priorities rather than just like public places.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, thanks for that answer. I know it's not necessarily clear cut, but that's
no, it's not. And
those are
you know,
great points.
It's great to have more charging everywhere. Like, I'm not against it, but I think, like, we all know there's limited money, so let's like prioritize it.
Well, thanks. And on that note, I would say that's something the city is starting to do through our climate change plan, our community energy and emissions plan, which certainly prioritizes electric vehicles and the sort of supporting networks for that as one of the ways we're going to get our emissions down. So, Cara, I want to thank you very much for providing more insights into that whole topic, and certainly encourage anyone who's listening now or on YouTube to check out Plug and Drive if you have any other questions or curiosities about electric vehicles. I know it's a great resource, and certainly appreciate your time tonight, Cara.
Pleasure.
Thank you,
Pleasure.
everyone
Thank you
else.
for inviting me.